Hi, everybody in the MindValley Tribe membership. Welcome to this month's episode of Impact at Work. Now, the guest that I have for this month is going to talk to you about something that is so needed in today's era, where it seems like the technology that's been supposed to make our lives simpler is actually creating so much chaos. HIME is actually a specialist when it comes to how to use technology today to make your life even better, how to strike balance between your work, your health, your personal life. And we're going to be tackling a lot of rules that exist when it comes to hard work, when it comes to procrastination, and I'll give you a hint, it's not always that bad. And we're going to talk about how technology can become some of your best friend to actually make you more productive, set the proper boundaries, and realize that you don't need to be completely connected at all times when it comes to your work-life balance. Now, HIME is actually the founder of MC Forum, where she teaches tech entrepreneurs and marketers around the world from Tel Aviv, New York City, and San Francisco on how to use technology and how to become so much more productive. And so in this episode, you're going to be spending your time to know how to use your time better moving forward. So let's get started in the training. I can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's episode. HIME, welcome. I wanted to start this with a very interesting story that you were telling me just before we got on set. And, you know, it's easy to forget the fact that I have this device in my hands. And if I look at my short-term memory, it feels like I've had this forever. If I look even at my long-term memory, it feels like I've had it since I've been born. But the fact is it hasn't been that long that we have smart devices, and technology has expanded to a point so rapidly that it's almost like I can't even imagine living without it. How has that affected people, and what have you seen happen since these devices became available?
Yeah, so basically these devices are available to us only since 2007 for the early adopters among us, because Steve Jobs introduced the smartphone in 2007. And that on its own is a remarkable truth, because most people just feel that this has been their device and their best pal forever. But it's only been 10 years, and it's basically a revolution that really changed us in so many ways. And not always for the better. So when it comes to productivity, and which is what I'm an expert on, the smartphone has a lot of great features to help us be more efficient and get more things done, but it also inhales within it the entire attention economy, which means we're all obsessing ourselves over applications, meaning we're losing our productivity and efficiency, and we're getting a lot less done.
Which is fascinating, because you look at what it's done, you would think about all the tools, how much more information we have access to today, yet the leaps and bounds in productivity are nowhere near what I think we would have expected with so much technology.
Correct. Research shows that there is no increase in productivity since 2007. I personally believe that there is actually a decline. I do feel, and I hear it from people all around all the time, that everyone is obsessed with the here and now, doing whatever they need to do this week, but no one seems to get themselves around into their long-term objectives and the long-term tasks, quarter objectives, yearly objectives. Everyone's attention is into the urgent stuff, because they seem to take all of our time now. And that's not good. People neglect other parts of their lives because they only worry about the urgent stuff, while the most important things in life are the important, not urgent stuff. Mm-hmm. So your financial issues are important. They're not necessarily currently urgent. You're planning a family, your relationship, they're all important. They're not urgent. So we tend to neglect them. So we need to really be aware of that tendency and kind of fight back, although it's really hard, because the entire thing about these smartphones is that they're designed by technology companies for us to constantly have our attention to them. And technology companies are brain hacking us in order for us to spend more time on our devices in order for them to make more money. So that's the attention economy. And being aware of it is already half a way into gaining control over it, not being victims to it.
Which is exactly what we're going to be talking about through this whole episode. This digital era doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be victims to the fact that these devices are consuming so much more of our attention, our time, and there's some very different ways that we can look at working so that we can use them to our advantage. And so you've done many trainings with a lot of companies. You've helped them look at how they optimize their process. I love the fact that you've already mentioned how there's going to be this emerging industry about optimizing your kind of workflow based on the available technology. Can you talk a bit more about that before we jump into the training?
Yeah, of course. I do believe that I'm being a pioneer in the sense of opening a whole profession, a digital workflow expert, where people will be helping others to design their laptops, their computers, whatever, with the right web tools and workflows for their own profession. So there's going to be like a digital workflow expert for marketers and a digital workflow expert for architects and for attorneys and for accountants. And because there's so many web tools available for us today, but no one can find the time or have the time to learn all the features and all the settings and all the availabilities. So there's way too many web tools, there's way too much technology, but there's not enough people
kind of navigating
the gap, like closing the gap between how fast technology and web tools are at and where we are able to consume and operate efficiently with them. So there needs to be someone in the middle to kind of translate it all. And then I do believe that there's going to be a profession with digital workflows.
I love it. And so what you're all going to be getting a taste through the rules that we're going to identify in this training is how this role can actually be touching on the aspects that apply to everybody's work, whether you are a marketer, an entrepreneur, someone working in their career, office, no matter what you do, we're going to talk about some of these things which are related to technology, some of them not so much, but it's just about how to optimize your productivity in ways that you'll discover that you can get so much done in so much less time just by doing the right activities at the right time. And so with that, I wanted to bring up our first rule and see how we can actually change this into a new model of reality and what systems that can be used for people to apply this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So the first one that we talked about, and we've touched on this in Impact before, but you have such a unique angle to it, and I love the solutions you provide. But it's this constant reminder that you need to work harder. You know, you constantly have to work. If you want to achieve anything, you just need to always put your blood, your sweat, your tears, work as hard as possible and throughout, and that's the way to do it. But you have a very different approach to this. How would you explain it?
Well, I was raised on the value that there is a time and place for everything we want in life. There's a time and place for it. And our job is to make sure that whatever it is we're doing it in the right time and place for it. So if I want to take that and translate it into my own workday, I encourage people to build their workday in accordance to their HIME. And HIME stands for High Impact Minimum Effort. So basically what I encourage people to do is to understand, like go in deep within them and understand how their optimal workday looks like. When would be their optimum time to do their phone calls, to be involved with a bunch of phone calls? When would be fairly easy for them to do their phone calls for the day? I, for example, am not a very good morning person. I rather work quietly on my laptop and not talk to people if I don't have to. Unless something urgent, then of course I'm going to be available. But if nothing urgent is needed, then I would prefer to have my phone calls during noon hours. So that means that is my HIME for phone calls. Anywhere between 1 and 3, perfect. And for most of my phone calls, I'll be able to adjust them to those hours where I prefer. And that means I will run through a bunch of phone calls with ease. It won't require much of my energy. And when we start to plan a day where we take the minimum amount of effort into everything that we do, then our workday can end up after 7, 8 hours, and we will still have a lot more energy for the second part of our day, to work on our relationships, on our health, on kids, okay, whatever it is we have, but we don't have to finish a workday exhausted and then just kind of lay down on the sofa and try to relax and recuperate from a hard work day. We want our 7-8 hours of work to be half a day, and then there's still much more energy happening for the rest of the day. So in order for us to be able to do that, we need to go deeper inside and understand what is our communication preferences, what is our working preferences in accordance to when things come fairly easy.
And then what I like about this is because I've looked into ways to be more productive with my time. And often they use kind of like that prescribed method that you should be following. For example, some people will say you need to slay the dragon or do the hardest task first in the day. But I've noticed in my own behavior, sometimes when I do that, some of that task that needs to be done is not something I usually like to do in the morning. I have to put so much energy into getting it done. What you're saying is that I should actually be looking at what is the time of the day that those types of tasks usually get done the best and actually prioritize accordingly. Is that correct?
Right. So if you look at a workday, say start a day, okay, I wouldn't want to say workday because just look at a day from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night and try to figure out when would be the easiest time for you to do your sports activities, okay? Some people would find it fairly easy to go jogging at 6 a.m. in the morning, others 5 o'clock in the afternoon, some 9 o'clock in the evening. That would be their preferred time to jog, whatever, tennis, whatever sports activities they do. Then you want to find when is the easiest time for you to write documents. If you need to write concepts, if you need to write proposals, you need to sit down and write. When would be fairly easy for you to write? Maybe 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe 10 o'clock at night. My case, 10 o'clock at night. I would not even, try to get myself involved in writing because during my other work hours, I'd rather do other things. Then 10 o'clock at night, I would set the environment for it. I would, pour myself a glass of wine. I sit comfortably in my office, and then I'll put a timer. So I'll set the entire environment, and then I'll dwell into writing a document for an hour, and then I'll be 100% focused, and it won't require much energy. It'll actually be fun. So each one of our tasks has a different HIME. So it's very different to work on Excel sheets rather than preparing presentation slides, rather than writing documents, rather than working on emails, doing face-to-face meeting. Virtual meetings is different energy than face-to-face meetings. So when would be your preferred hour of the day for virtual meetings? It's not the same as having a face-to-face meeting. It requires a completely different focus and energy to it.
And so when I look at this, in essence, it's not just about trying to work hard all the time, because some people end up letting their work time expand to take the entire day, and then there's no more time left for any other activities. But what you're saying is that doesn't need to be the case. If we optimize around the HIME, we realize that so much more can be done, and even having that restraint on time actually makes you more productive.
Yeah.
I know you're going to be sharing an additional training about the calendar tool. And just to open up on that, what you'll notice in the additional training, this calendar tool is going to show you an example of how you can use HIME as a concept and build out your calendar so that you can be so much more productive, so you don't need to put in as many hours and still get as much done.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'll show you the way I manage my calendar. It's a really simple method, but very practical and very helpful. The one thing I want to mention about HIME is that it's not necessarily something you will understand immediately. You have to kind of go out into a self-exploration journey where you're trying things. So you try to do your exercise in the morning, and then you see, was it hard for me to get up in bed? Was I stressing myself to do it? Well, maybe that's not my HIME for that sport. I should try again 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Same goes for phone calls. Do your bunch of phone calls, group them together, and schedule them for 10 o'clock in the morning. If you see that this, 10 o'clock in the morning is not the right time for phone calls for you, for many reasons that, that can be. It can be because work meetings are done in those hours. It could be but that there's urgent things that need your attention. But you have to try and schedule them for 10 o'clock in the morning. And then if you see that it wasn't as easy, it wasn't as fun, you want to look for the fun. If it wasn't easy and fun, then try to schedule them in a different hour of the day. So basically, we're searching for it, and it's very subjective. What would suit me will not suit you.
So it's not like a cookie cutter like a lot of people preach, which is what I love about this method.
Yeah, I see a lot of articles on the internet about use the morning hours to do your hardest task. That's when you're most productive. I don't believe that there is just one point of the day where we are more productive. I believe we can be productive throughout our 12-hour or 16 hours where we're awake. And we just have to understand what would be fairly easy for us to do. Now, when people work in global companies, it's even more important because they have to work in different time zones and they have to be available for, East Coast, West Coast, whatever. For them, it would even make more sense to split their day work, not to do it in
Like a 9 to 5 kind of scenario.
yeah, but not
Continuously?
But break it down. Maybe they'll do their private tasks in the morning and then they'll start their workday at 11 and then until 2, and then they'll stop because they want the US market to wake up, so they'll wait for 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's what they'll do another 2 hours working with the US, depending on where you sit. But you can split your workday and be super productive by doing that. I mean, work can be easy and fun. It doesn't have to be all sweat and tears. And,
Well, actually, that leads a little to kind of a very similar rule, though that kind of has its own angle, which is, a lot of people sometimes you get stuck in your work, and it's like, okay, when you get stuck or things get really hard, you just need to double down on the work. Like, you just need to work even harder. If your things aren't blowing through, you're trying to write a document, it's not working. It's just just work even harder to get it through. But you have a very different approach.
Yeah, I was also brought up on the idea that no pain, no gain, meaning you have to sweat in order to get someplace. And if you haven't fought through something, then you might not achieve anything in life. And my ideas and my method, what I teach is, super helpful and practical, is on the contrary. If you hit a wall and if something's going rough and tough on you, then that's your sign to let go. That's your sign that you're trying to achieve something not at its time. Obviously, if you're trying to write a document and it's not working out for you and you're sweating your way into it, then that's not your HIME, and you should let go, literally let go of the keyboard, save the document, and try approaching this writing task at a different day or at a different time of the day, and then play around with it and see when it comes fairly easy for you, and set the environment for it. Very important to set the environment for it. But before I get into the environment, I just want to specify how important it is to notice that if things go tough, let go, okay, and let your mind rest, because what people don't know yet, and this is just recent brain studies show that our frontal lobe of the brain is responsible to all of our new ideas, new concepts, insights, imagination, personal development, business development. All our personal growth and connections happen in the frontal lobe. And that wires up in one condition, in the condition that we stare. So if we simply just look out without trying to focus on anything, just kind of gaze your look, that's when your frontal lobe kicks into action, real good, and then it starts wiring up. And we want to be in that stage, in that phase, or in that state of mind as much as possible, because that will give us new information that we can then focus on work and get a lot of more things done. So we want to be able to just relax and stare in order for the frontal lobe to kick in. That's why people get their best ideas when they're in the shower or when they go out to jog. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, things start making sense and they have new ideas of how to solve problems. So if something goes hard on you, then you just leave it and look for the closest window or anything you have around you and just let your eyes rest and let your brain do the work for you.
So I feel like in the workplace, there's probably some judgment to be done around that. So I'd use an example. I'm working on a task, and Fact is if you're not in the optimal state, it's almost like you feel better if you're going to be looking at that screen doing nothing for 20 minutes. But in essence, what would be required to kind of give that reset and activate a new part of the brain is to actually take a 5 minutes and then find a way to be in a state of gazing, be in a state where it actually lights up a different part of the brain, which floods in the new ideas, and then you can actually get the task done.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So how do people usually communicate that within the office? Because it brings up productivity, but it seems like some people would be afraid to do that.
Counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive completely. So if you're just finding yourself looking out the window, you might fear that your boss will cross the hall and look into you and say, well, what's happening? Are you having an easy, resting day? Are you not at work? Because it's counterintuitive to look at people just staring out the window and to figure that they're actually working. But that's what's actually happening. And yes, we have to educate ourselves and the people around us to the fact that even when it seems as if I'm resting, actually, my brain is processing a lot of information and starts wiring up in new ways for me to solve and understand things from a different angle. So yes, staring at the window while you're in the office is actual work. So there's this wonderful post titled "The Advantage of Being a Little Underemployed." You can then download it and pass it on to your boss, and that explains exactly the concept of letting go as a way of becoming a better employee that solves problems faster rather than just clinging on a problem.
So as we wrap this up, we're talking about how when things get tough, it's not about just grinding through. Give yourself permission to take a pause and to gaze, because it'll activate your prefrontal cortex. It'll get you to actually start connecting ideas. And the fact is we have this lovely article that we'll be able to share with everyone that will make it so that it's not as awkward talking to your boss while you're sitting in an alley, or not alley, in the hallway, trying to gaze out, because it actually brings to a lot of productivity.
Yeah, written by Morgan Housel, The Advantage of Being a Little Underemployed. Great article. Pass it to your boss. Works like magic.
Awesome. So I love how these concepts are counterintuitive. This next one particularly is about one that I think everybody has a lot of judgment on themselves about. It's procrastination. And, everyone, or a lot of people, or let's be honest, I myself find myself dealing with procrastination itself, and I'm so hard on myself every time that I do it. And when I feel like I'm procrastinating, my usual reaction is I just need to fight through it. I really just need to I need to change this. I don't want to procrastinate. I need to fight against it. Again, with a lot of this resistance approach. You have a different take on procrastination, which I found fascinating.
Yeah. I like to get things easy. I don't like to fight through things. I want life to be fun. So I do encourage people to procrastinate because procrastination is actually good for you. Procrastination means, and that's from ancient history, which people were back then smarter than what we have today in our cultural environment, yes. So in ancient history, procrastination meant waiting for the right time. And I encourage people to procrastinate because everything has its own time and place, and we can't push everything into 1 week or 1 day. And when we just manage this procrastination, and again, this goes back to the calendar, and we will show you in a separate clip how exactly to manage your calendar, so you can then simply procrastinate things and use that method to do things next week, in 2 weeks' time, next month, next quarter even. Push things forward till the right time and place for them, when the right time. So you can just capture a task, but you don't need to operate on it immediately. You can just push it forward in your calendar and have it wait for you for a better time and place for it to dissolve. And sometimes when you do that, things kind of happen and tasks kind of, finish up on themselves, without even you, just by adding it to your calendar and then pushing it a month forward, all of a sudden you'll get someone calling you and say, listen, this and that happened. All of a sudden, oh, okay, that's exactly what I need to do. And then this task just disappears without effort, only because it sat there and we didn't try to finish it this week. And the reason people want to finish everything this week is because they don't necessarily have a method to manage all their tasks in different time slots. So when you start managing your calendar that way, you can actually start procrastinating, but in a managed manner, where things don't fall in between. They do get done, they just don't get done this week.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to overestimate the amount of things that we will be able to push through in a week. We overestimate how many things we'll achieve in a week. By the way, we underestimate how many things we can achieve in a year. But we overestimate what we can achieve in a week. So if you start pushing things in your calendar and you understand all of a sudden that, oh, I plan to do all of this week, I only got through a half of it, but it's okay. I understand that I'm only human and I'm not a superhero and I can't do everything at once. And it's okay, I'm pushing it forward and I'll take care of it next week. And when the time is right for that, I'll finish that other task. All of a sudden, you're playing with a lot of time playing for you.
And then you still end up achieving a lot of the tasks. Now,
More.
I'd have a
Just by
question though.
procrastination.
What about any kind of bad procrastination? Like, is there a way of procrastinating that's actually wouldn't be as productive?
Well, if you procrastinate a task, for example, some people tell me, listen, no matter how hard I try, there is no HIME to sort out my 401k issues, whatever. I have to open this, I have to open a bank account, I have to do that, all kinds of administrative tasks that I just can't find the right time to do them. It's hard whenever I try to approach them. There are no HIME for it, and I keep procrastinating it. So that means that's what you would refer to as bad procrastination because you just never get that task progressing with or finished with. What we then want to think is what is lying in behind that difficulty. Maybe there's a prior task that needs to be done. Maybe there's more information I need to obtain before I try to fix my 401k issues.
And just for the reference, a 401k is a retirement fund in the US, right? So it's just managing your finances or dealing with some of the life finance budgeting issues.
Yeah, like insurance and finance issues are the hardest for many people. I do tell them it's not your fault, it's designed to be hard. It's designed for you to not understand it. That's the reality of things. But if you're pushing it forward and you're not progressing, it means that you need to stop and think, maybe there's a prior task that needs to be done. Maybe it's not the task of sorting out my financial and insurance issues. Maybe the task is to find a consultant. So that's what I'm putting in my calendar now. Post on Facebook looking for a good financial advisor, retirement advisor, whatever. And then the task is take the three top feedbacks you got from your 3 most trusted friends and reach out to those consultants. And then you'll be able to push with that task forward because there's a prior task that needs to be done.
I love it. So in essence, when we're talking about procrastination, it's usually a question of us trying to load too many things in one week and then realizing that the procrastination time is essential to find the right time to do the task. If you push them and schedule them at a later time where it gets into the HIME of getting that task done, you'll be so much more productive. And in the cases where you feel like you're doing bad procrastination or you're just not completing an essential task ever, it's like endlessly being delayed, it's more of a question of the fact that you need to possibly do an earlier step than the actual task itself to be able to have that be conquered. So it's to reevaluate the task itself to see how you can conquer that procrastination that is deemed as bad procrastination.
It means you need to stop, think, stare, gaze, and figure out what is the initial task that needs to be done before you get to that bigger task of whatever it is that you're dealing with.
Love it.
So stop and gaze and you'll get the answers then.
Perfect. Give yourself a chance to breathe. Actually, that procrastination time is actually a time that you should be using as that prefrontal cortex time to start connecting a lot of the tasks that needs to get done.
Yeah. I want to give you an example of something that I've pushed for a quarter. I had an idea about this model that I wanted to teach in one of my classes, and I sketched it in my notebook, and then I sent it to my graphic designer. And she sent me back the first design, and she asked for my corrections and I'm opening that file, and I'm looking at the image, and there's something wrong with it, and I don't know what it is, and I'm staring at it for about 5 minutes straight, and she's waiting for my corrections, and I don't know what to say. Something is wrong with the model. I don't know what it is. And then I said, okay, stop, close the file, move it forward in your calendar for next week, and then try looking at it again, because this was an important task, but it wasn't urgent. I didn't need to finish it the same day or the same week. I could, easily look at it again next week. So next week comes along, and I open that email again, and I look at that picture and the model, and I'm still not figuring out what is bad, what is wrong with it. I don't know what to say to the designer. And I kept pushing it in my calendar, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. 3 months go by. And I teach a class, and I still don't have that model in a design format. So I'm sketching it on a board. And good enough, in the room sits a graphic designer, and she looks at what I just sketched, and she said to me, "But Chen, why are you doing it horizontal and not vertical?" And I'm like, "Oh, that was the problem."
Yeah.
That was the problem. Now, she was a graphic designer. She easily saw something that I, not being a graphic designer, could probably never see. And I was like, oh my God, you just you just fixed a problem that I've been trying to cope with for about 3-4 months.
Yeah.
And that's it. That was the end of it. I just changed it to vertical. I sent it back to the designer. I finished the task. It was like effortless, but it took a quarter to finish. But every time I opened that email, it took me about 5 minutes to close it again and push it to the right time. Obviously not the right time. Wait. And then eventually it just kind of happened, and I got that done with.
There's a lot of surrendering required in that.
Trusting, yes, trusting, not pushing to things. Like water, water, they hit a wall, they take a turn, they don't stay.
So I think that gives people permission to maybe let themselves have a little bit more leadway when it comes to these tasks that they hit a wall with. And the fact that sometimes just having that time that you're going to be gazing is going to bring up these ideas, and sometimes, very often, serendipitous things come by to give you that kind of hint within your environment that will make that task push forward. So I love that. And the last one, or not the last one, we still have 2 more rules. The next one's really related to having technology today, and especially moving towards this like global economy and global ecosystems. We feel like we have to be on all the time. And, for people that are in the workplace, it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be maybe working 9 to 5, but it's not really the case. I'm looking at my emails at night. I'm looking at some messages I'm getting from clients. It seems like you're working all the time, and it's kind of it's almost overwhelming. How do I find myself to be able to disconnect? Can I disconnect? What's the remedy for this like endless work hour that seems to be expanding more and more with more technology that's supposed to simplify our life, but is now getting us just so hooked to the work?
Yeah. So technology has good sides and advantages and disadvantages, positive and negative aspects to it. We really want to only obtain the positives, but part of the negative is being all the time accessible and reachable. And because we're reachable and accessible at all times, then our bosses expect us to be reachable and accessible at all times. So people are obsessed with checking their messages and emails because they fear that something important and urgent might pop up on their screen. So they keep checking on that constantly. So there's 2 things that we want to know about this. First of all, in France, they just, 2017, they kicked in a new law. It's called the right to disconnect, and it basically allows employees to not be accessible to their employers at all times, allowing them to have leisure time, to have private time, to have a social life, a private life, and not having to all the time check on their messages. So the company could send them emails and messages. It's okay, but it's not okay to expect them to respond to it. That's the illegal part of it. You don't expect the employee to respond unless it's urgent. So that brings me back to how we can still work it out without waiting for that law to be to kick in the country we live in. We want to predefine urgent with the people we work with and our family and friends as well. because what it means is basically for your team to decide how do I reach you when something urgent happens, and what is urgent. So, for example, you can say anything that needs to be done before tomorrow at noon is considered urgent. And when something urgent comes up, you call me, okay? So you pick up the phone and you call me, meaning I don't need to check on my emails and messages all the time. I know my boss will call me if anything urgent happens, and anything urgent is described between us. We agreed that anything that needs to be done until tomorrow at 12. So an employee can come back home, put their phones on the counter, the kitchen counter, just make sure it's on volume so you can hear it ring, and they can just go on with their leisure time, not having to obsessively check and see what's happening with their workplace. That is important not just from the point of view of having fun. It's important because employees that have leisure time, that have time for themselves to be healthy and have relationships, go back to their workplace with a lot more energy, and they are a lot more productive and useful for their employers. So it's not just nice to have, it's actually good for business. To have my employees disconnect is good for business. So we don't have to disconnect completely. We just have to make sure we're only reachable for urgent matters. And each one of us describes urgent on a different scale. But we can all agree that if something urgent happens, please do not email me and do not text me. Just pick up the phone and call me because that's what this phone knows how to do. People forgot that it knows how
to actually make calls with the phone.
Don't use it for that.
I find it interesting because you're right. Like the whole era of instant messaging and all of these messaging tools have been designed to be so good at getting our attention, and then the workplace just makes it so that you want to always be responding. But the fact is, the majority of the people watching are not necessarily working in an ER, an emergency room in a hospital, where like if they are 20 minutes late to responding to a message, there's no dramatic event that happens. But people feel like that need to be able to be so responsive. So what we're saying here is nobody's gonna be going through a crisis. You don't need to be connected all the time. Fact is, it's more productive for the company if you are not, because you get that rest time. Second is that countries that are progressive, like France, are already recognizing the health issues it's causing for people to be so connected all the time. And then thirdly is the solution is quite simple. The system people can use is just have that conversation that defines urgency.
Yeah.
And once you've had that conversation, you can set the right protocol to respect that way that if an emergency does come in, you are reachable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to make it so that you're always getting ding, ding, ding all the times for any kind of message that comes in after hours, etc.
Right. And if you take it to a family point of view, then I've asked my family that if anything urgent happens, call me more than once.
Yeah.
Because the first phone call, I might mute it because that's what I am. I'm not responsive to every phone call and every message that comes in. I focus on other things, and I won't necessarily answer the phone whenever they call. So I said, if anything urgent, you have to call me twice. Yeah. So now I know it's urgent. So that's my sign with them. So you want to make those signs together with your friends, with your family, with your boss. And once you've had that communication and you've understood what is urgent and how you reach me when something urgent happens, now I can, sit quietly and do my work, read my book, do my stuff, not having to obsessively check on my phone all the time.
Brilliant. And for the final rule here that we want to talk about, touches again about this technology. A lot of people feel that the era of focus is dying, and these technology tools, all it's doing is taking away our focus. Is technology all bad for focus?
No, technology is not all bad for focus. Technology is really helping us achieve a lot more without getting out of our house. I mean, you don't even have to stand in traffic in order to be super efficient. For most places, you would actually be more efficient staying at home. Another thing that lots of workplaces have not yet understood, how important it is to let your employees work from home from time to time. A lot more efficient than standing in traffic.
We're making a case study at MindValley, so we're working on it too.
Okay. There's actually several companies in New Zealand that cut to 4 days work week, very efficient as well. Sweden went down to 6 hours of work day, described as 6 hours work day, and Sweden is one of the strongest economies in Europe and in the world. So, so it really is a matter of being efficient in those 6 hours that you work, and not about the amount of hours that you put in. Going back to what you asked about technology, so I was saying that it really does give us a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of good things that we can obtain, but we just have to wisely operate it. We have to go into the settings of every feature, of every app and web tool that we install on our computer or mobile devices. We need to go into the settings and we need to play around with it and make sure that we operate it into our own, based on our own preferences. For example, I don't know if many people know, but we all have in our mobile phones today a feature called D&D, stands for Do Not Disturb. And when you click that D&D button, only the people who are in your favorite contact list will be able to reach you. So if you go into that favorite contact list and you make sure that it's, you know, the 5 most important people in your life, then you can then switch to D&D mode when you read a book, and you know that you'll be accessible to those to those 5 people. So that, like this freedom, enduring habits. You know, so you want to work around with those features in order to create yourself more space and more free time.
Because a lot of people find themselves looking for the next solution or next app, or we're connecting ourselves to new technology. But with all of these technologies comes another array of distractions that come in. And as you've mentioned, these companies have been becoming really good at showing us using these notifications and things to get us hooked to their apps. But a big one of them is just taking the time to analyze what technology you're using, what prompts are they sending you, and managing the prompts so that it only sends you the ones that are still relevant for you to receive. So that you don't find yourself being like, you know, I think of that Pixar movie where the dog hears a squirrel and you hear him go like, squirrel. And it seems like every 10 seconds there's another notification that comes in that does that to us. But it's up to us to manage those settings.
It's up to us to manage it. And again, it goes back to being a very subjective preference list. What will suit you in your notifications? You know, you can choose something that would be entirely different for me. Either the pop-up screens, the sounds, the frequency of all those notifications coming in. We can play, there's a big range of options, and we need to find the right ones for us. So imitating other people's choices of apps and web tools is not going to take you a long way. You have to incorporate only the ones that are right for you. And there's a search, but not being affected by the buzz. You know, there's the new app, there's a new web tool, I need to install it now into my tablet, into my mobile. You know, it's a very sexy field of all this technology. People are like, but without having a very clear understanding of principles and values and life values, strong, standing for you there, then just taking in those web tools will create more chaos.
So when you look at other people's like suggestions, use them as inspiration, but not imitation.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly. Just dig in, understand what would be good for you, what would suit you, what would be fun. Really look for the easy and fun. You have no idea how efficient your workday will look if you just get it with the easy going, you know, not fighting through things. And it's really counterintuitive. I know that we've been all brought up with complete different set of values, but we're now in a revolution, and we need to rewire our brain and adjust to our new thinkings and new ideas.
And it came up so quick as well. You know, from the start of our talk, you know, we're talking about 11 years that it's been that these new technologies are in our face. We're evolving on how to work with them. They're becoming much more friendly on allowing the flexibility with those notifications today because we demand it, we need it. And I love how this whole training was labeled. There's a recurring theme that you mentioned for productivity, which is fun.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, When you learn how to use the right tools and work in the right way, you can get a lot of things done while still having fun.
Yeah, right things for you. Like, right thing for you. And
So as we get to the closing, I want to recap things a little bit here. So we talked about, it's not always about just working really hard to get things done. It's about finding that HIME, that optimal time to get the right things done. And as you start looking at these different ways that you can do the tasks at different times, you'll start noticing patterns of when they can get done very easily. And then we talked also about how when you get to a wall, it's not always about just working even harder. It's actually about letting yourself the chance to step back and using some of the advantages that latest science has mentioned, that if you allow yourself to gaze and relax, you start connecting new pathways, which usually gets you unstuck. We talked about how procrastination is not necessarily an evil thing. It's actually something that means you got to do the right thing at the right time, using schedule things, realizing things that aren't urgent can be pushed back, and either the right thing will happen where you will connect the right thoughts, again using that gazing method, or seeing what kind of circumstance comes up that actually makes it so that the procrastination you did was maybe to show you another event that needed to happen to give you even more clarity. And the fact that people feel they need to be connected 24/7 all the time, it's not always the case. You have to set your own boundaries, define what is urgent, let yourself take off the notifications and set boundaries with your workplace so that you become productive on the times you are at work. You give yourself a chance to rest when you are resting, so the time you get back on the work mode, you are at your most effective. And then finally, the tools and technology aren't here to make us completely unfocused and unproductive. In essence, they have many advantages, but we need to take responsibility and take ownership of the fact that a lot of these devices need to be setting adjusted for your preferences. And then we're going to have some amazing tools that you can look that will support you even further. The 2 additional content videos that we're going to have is how to actually set up your calendar, looking at yours for inspiration, and how you can set your own as well. And we're going to go through even more web tools that you can use and ways to eliminate those distractions so you can be at your ultimate performance self in this digital era. Any other thoughts in closing that we could share with the people throughout this amazing training?
I would like to share a story.
Please do.
A year ago, had to be 3 years ago. My time lapse are like, whoo. About 3 years ago, I was sitting in my living room around 9 o'clock in the evening. My back was with the kitchen is like located in the back, so I don't see what's happening in the kitchen. And I was just watching my, favorite television shows at 9 o'clock in the evening after the kids had gone to sleep. And all of a sudden, I could feel an energy change in the house. I could feel something different is happening. I didn't know what it was, and I just looked back. And I see my husband sitting on the kitchen counter, leaning over his laptop. Furious face, red, angry, upset. He's not saying a word. I could sense it without him saying a word, but I could see something really difficult is happening over there. And I'm looking at him, it's like, what is happening? What are you doing? He doesn't normally open his laptop in the evening. And he says to me, oh, you don't understand. It's the end of the year and we have to do those presentation slides. And I don't like doing it. I'm never good at that. And I just need to finish it. And I hate doing it. And I said to him, okay, Tal, obviously this is not the time for you to do your presentation slides. So why don't you try get up earlier tomorrow morning than usual, hit the road before traffic. He had a 9 o'clock meeting outside the office. Said, go sit in a coffee place and then check and see how this task of preparing those slides looks for you at 7 o'clock in the morning. But we don't know if it's gonna work or not, but we're just gonna check and see on that. Well enough, he agreed to it and closed his laptop and got up tomorrow, the day after, got earlier, hit the roads before traffic, and then he called me up at 8:45. And he said, you will not believe, I finished more than half of the slides that I had to do. I finished a bunch of phone calls that I had to do for the day. And I'm going to my 9 o'clock meeting. I'm already finished with most of the tasks that I was due for the morning. So by 9 o'clock, he was already super efficient that most of his workday has been, behind him by now. And I said, okay, great. So now you know that, doing that presentation slides might be better to schedule in the morning hours when you're sitting in a coffee place and that could be good. And then a week later, he calls me up and he says, listen, I found a better HIME for presentations. I said, really? So yes, after lunch, I close the door. Everyone's in their offices. Office goes quiet. And I was able to finish my boss's presentation and my own presentation. And now the other department wants me to do theirs too.
There you
And I
go.
said, okay, now you're becoming too efficient. So now if there's no extra charge, if there's no extra payment for it, okay, you can stop right there with being super efficient on those slides.
So people should really be open to the possibility of this. Please go and try all these texts, because you might be surprising yourself on how much. Because I know the feeling of being in a HIME. I think most people have had a taste of it, and it's like you don't even see time fly, and you get so much done.
Right.
And it's so much more accessible than we think if we're actually scheduling it.
Right.
I love it. Batren, thank you so much for your time. For everybody watching, I hope you had as much fun listening as I had filming this. Thank you so much again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.